Good day, everyone. My name is Patrick Rascone. I am President of Sales and Development at Volcanna Rain, where we distribute a potent volcanic mineral-based water conditioner that eliminates and reduces 200 plus toxic chemicals in water while adding beneficial trace minerals. We like to say we reduce the most and retain the best, and believe the quality of plants and soil depends on the quality of water. The point we are emphasizing in this presentation is how electrically coherent water is what marries minerals to water. It provides the structure that allow ion exchange to occur, keeping minerals mobile, coordinated, and biologically usable. When that electrical coherence collapses, interference and immobilization occurs. Thank you for your time and enjoy taking in the information. And don't forget to check us out at volcannarain.com. Today our presentation is on water, minerals, and the hidden collapse of soil biology. Why mineral mobility, not nutrient quantity, now limits regeneration. Most of us in regeneration talk about soil, carbon, microbes, and minerals, but we rarely talk about water as the organizing medium that connects them all. Today I want to talk about what happens when minerals stop moving, even when they're still present. Thanks for taking the time to be here. Most of us working in regenerative agriculture already agree on a lot. We know soil biology matters. We know mineral diversity matters. We know carbon alone isn't enough. And we know that simply adding more inputs doesn't fix broken systems. But there's a layer of the system that often gets overlooked. Not because it's unimportant, but because it's so familiar that we stop seeing it. And that layer is water. Today I want to talk about water not as a solvent and not as something that just carries nutrients from point A to point B, but as the organizing medium that determines whether minerals remain mobile, whether microbes can function properly, and whether plants can actually coordinate metabolism. The argument I'm going to make is simple, but uncomfortable. In many soils today, minerals haven't disappeared. They've stopped moving. And when mineral mobility collapses, biology quietly loses coherence, even when everything looks adequate on paper. This isn't a talk about yield claims, shortcuts. It's about understanding where regeneration can stall, even when we're doing many things right, and why restoring function may require paying attention not just to soil and microbes, but to the water that connects them. In regeneration, it's about restoring relationships rather than forcing outcomes. Then water may be the most upstream relationship we've been underestimating. That's the lens I'd like to explore with you today. The problem we think we're solving, soil depletion, is usually framed as a number of problems. Less magnesium, less zinc, less selenium, less biology. We've been trained to think in terms of deficiencies and what's missing. But what if the minerals are still there? And the real problem is that they're no longer mobile. When we talk about soil degradation, the conversation almost always starts with numbers, soil tests, tissue tests, deficiency charts. We look for what's missing and we try to put it back. Magnesium is low, so we add magnesium. Zinc is low, so we add zinc. Selenium disappears from regions, so we fortify food or supplement animals. This way of thinking has shaped soil science, agronomy, and nutrition for decades. And to be clear, this approach has produced real gains, yield increased, crops grew faster, calories became abundant, but something else happened alongside those gains. Even as yields rose, nutritional density declined, flavor faded, stress tolerance weakened, crops began relying more heavily on chemical protection, biology remained present, but less coordinated. What's striking is that many soils still contain large total mineral reserves. If you digest the soil and analyze it, the elements are there, yet plants behave as if they can't access them. That disconnect suggests the problem isn't simply mineral absence, it's mineral delivery. Minerals must be released, dissolved, transported, and exchanged before biology can use them. If any step in that chain breaks, adding more minerals doesn't restore function. Today's talk starts from that premise, that modern agriculture may be suffering less from depleted minerals than from a breakdown in the systems that keep minerals mobile, coordinated, and biologically useful. And that forces us to ask a different set of questions than we're used to asking. A different hypothesis. What if the real crisis is mineral immobilization, not absence? Minerals are present, biology is present, yields acceptable, yet nutrition is declining. Many soils still contain vast mineral reserves, yet plants behave as if they're deficient. That paradox points to a delivery failure, not a supply failure. The missing middle, delivery. Between rock and roots lies a delivery system. Rock, soil, soil, microbes, microbes, plants, plants, and food. Water connects every step. Minerals don't teleport from rock into plants. They move through water, slowly, electrically, biologically. At some point, we have to confront a paradox. If minerals are missing, adding them back should restore function. But in many regenerative systems, that isn't what we see. Inputs increase, biology improves on paper, yet plant quality and resilience lag behind expectations. A more accurate way to describe what's happening in many soils is not depletion, but immobilization. Minerals are present, but they're locked up, bound to soil, particles, precipitated out of solution, antagonizing one another, or simply unable to move through the system in a coordinated way. Biology doesn't use minerals as static objects. It uses them as mobile, charged participants in metabolic networks. Minerals have to move through water films, microbial interfaces, and root surfaces to do their work. When that moment slows, function degrades, even in concentrations that look adequate. This is why soil and tissue tests can be misleading. They tell us what's present, not what's active. They measure abundance, not mobility, and living systems care far more about mobility than totals. When minerals stop moving, plants adapt. They still grow, but they simplify. Carbon fixation becomes less efficient. Secondary metabolites decline. Stress tolerance narrows. Nothing collapses dramatically. It just gets thinner, season after season. Framing the problem as immobility rather than deficiency changes everything. It shifts our attention from what we add to the system to whether the system can actually move and coordinate what's already there. Lithobiome. Soil biologists lean in. The microbes that turn rock into nutrition. Fungi penetrate mineral lattices. Bacteria run redox cycles. Organic acids and chelators release ions. Less than 10% of soil microbes do most mineral liberation. This system is fragile and it fails quietly. If minerals don't move on their own, the obvious question is, what actually makes them move? On human and agricultural timescales, it isn't geological weathering. Rock doesn't slowly dissolve into plant nutrition over decades in a field. What drives mineral release in living soils is biology, specifically a small, highly specialized subset of microbes and fungi. These organisms operate at the soil-mineral interface. Fungal physically penetrate mineral lattices. Bacteria secrete targeted organic acids and chelators. Redox active microbes cycle iron, manganese, and sulfur in microcytes, cracking minerals from within and releasing ions into the soil, water, where life can access them. This system represents only a fraction of total soil biomass, but it performs the most critical work. Most microbes recycle what's already loose. This group opens the vault. You can think of this system as a functional unit, a biological machine that converts rock into nutrition. When it's working, mineral diversity stays in circulation. When it weakens, minerals don't disappear, they immobilize. What's important is that this system is disproportionately dependent on ultra-trace and rare earth elements. These elements act as coordinators, stabilizing enzyme geometry, managing redox reactions, and synchronizing microbial activity. That makes the lithobiome the first system to fail when mineral diversity narrows. And once it falters, the entire mineral delivery chain, from rock to root, begins to slow, even though the soil may still look alive by conventional measures. What breaks first? Ultra-trace and rare earth elements, required in parts per billion, coordinate enzyme networks, stabilize redox and membranes. These elements don't feed plants, they coordinate plant metabolism, and they're the first to immobilize. If the lithobiome is the machinery that turns rock into biology, the next question is why that machinery fails unevenly. Why do certain functions collapse early while others appear intact for years? The answer lies in the role of ultra-trace and rare earth elements. These elements are not required in large amounts. They don't build structure, they coordinate function. They stabilize enzyme geometry, manage redox reactions, tune membrane charge, and synchronize microbial signaling. Because they operate at parts per billion levels, their availability depends entirely on precision. They must remain mobile, correctly charged, and properly coordinated in water films as microbial and mineral surfaces. Even small disruption in water chemistry, redox balance, or ionic competition are enough to knock them out of circulation. When soils are flooded with dominant ions, calcium, potassium, sodium, ammonium, ultra-trace elements lose the competition. They precipitate, bind incorrectly, or become biologically invisible long before macrominerals show obvious deficiencies. This is why systems can look healthy while losing coordination. The major components remain, growth continues, but the fine-tuning elements that synchronize metabolism are gone. Once ultra-trace elements fall out of circulation, the lithobiome weakens further because it depends on those elements to run its enzymes. Minerals release slowly, mobility declines, and a self-reinforcing loop emerges. Collapse doesn't happen all at once. It begins with the loss of coordination. Why fertility programs miss this? NPK floods the system with salts. Roots stop foraging. Mycorrhizal trade declines. Mineral release slows. Plants adapt. They grow faster, but they stop investing in mineral liberation. One of the hardest things to talk about in regenerative circles is that many of the tools we rely on to grow crops efficiently also interfere with mineral mobility. Not because they're evil, but because biology adapts to them. Heavy use of soluble nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium floods the soil with immediately available ions. From the plant's perspective, this is a shortcut. Roots no longer need to invest energy in microbial partnerships to access nutrients. Mycorrhizal associations weaken. Root exudation declines. When plants stop feeding microbes, the microbes that liberate minerals from rock lose their energy source. Biological weathering slows. Ultra-trace and rare earth elements, already present at extremely low concentrations, fall out of circulation fast. At the same time, high salt loads after soil water chemistry. Ionic competition increases. Calcium, magnesium, potassium, and sodium begin to interfere with one another. Minerals precipitate or bind tightly to soil particles instead of remaining mobile in water films. The result is subtle. Crops still grow, yields may even increase, but the biological machinery that keeps minerals moving becomes less active. The system shifts from coordinated to simplified. This is why adding more biology or more minerals doesn't always restore function. If the water chemistry and ionic environment are hostile to mobility, the system can't reassemble itself. Regeneration stalls not because biology is absent, but because the medium that supports mineral exchange is no longer doing its job. Minerals didn't disappear. They stopped moving. Precipitation, antagonism, charge interference. ICP may show minerals present, but mobility is what matters biologically. At this point, a reasonable objection comes up. If mineral mobility is collapsing, why don't our tests show it? The answer is that most soil and tissue tests were never designed to measure movement, coordination, or function. They measure presence. They tell us how much of an element exists in a sample, not whether that element is mobile, biologically active, or participating in metabolic networks. A soil test can show adequate calcium, magnesium, iron, and trace elements, while those same minerals are tightly bound to soil particles, precipitated as insoluble salts, or locked out by ionic competition. From the test perspective, they're present. From the plant's perspective, they might as well not be. Tissue tests have the same limitation. They show what made it to the plant, not what failed along the way. They don't tell us how much energy the plant spent accessing those minerals, what metabolic trade-offs were required, or which coordinating elements never arrived at all. Living systems care about flow, not totals. Enzymes care about timing. Microbes care about gradients. Roots care about mobility in water films, measuring in microns, not concentrations measured in parts per million. When we rely exclusively on static measurements, we miss dynamic failure. The system looks adequate right up until coordination quietly erodes. By the time deficiencies appear on paper, the deeper machinery has often been comprised for years. Enter water. Water is not a passive solvent. It organizes charge. It maintains gradients. It coordinates ions. Water is the electrical medium of life. If water loses coherence, minerals lose function. Mineral exchange happens at surfaces, roots, microbes, soil particles, where water is structured, not random. If minerals are present but not moving, and biology is present but not coordinating, then something upstream has to be failing. That something is water. We tend to think of water as neutral, a background solvent that simply carries nutrients from one place to another. But in living systems, water is not passive. It organizes charge. It maintains ionic gradients. It determines whether minerals remain mobile, compatible, and biologically accessible. Every critical exchange in soil biology happens in thin water films, at mineral surfaces, around microbial membranes along root hairs. In these boundary layers, water behaves very differently than it does in a beaker. Its structure, charge separation, and redox behavior determine whether ions can interact productively or interfere with one another. When water chemistry becomes simplified through excess salts, imbalanced ions, or loss of mineral diversity, it loses its ability to keep minerals organized. Elements that once moved cooperatively begin to compete. Ultra-trace elements fall out first. Mobility declines long before concentrations change. This is why so many soil problems resist direct correction. We try to fix biology or add minerals without addressing the medium that connects them. But if water can't maintain mineral coordination, neither microbes nor roots can do their jobs efficiently. At this point in the system, water isn't just a carrier, it's the gatekeeper. And when that gate closes, everything downstream adapts to a narrower, less resilient operating range. Electrical coherence in water. Structured, charge-separated water interfaces with matter. Thin films matter. Boundaries matter. To understand why water controls mineral mobility, we need to move past the idea of water as a random liquid. In living systems, water is structured, charged, and organized, especially at interfaces. Near surfaces like soil particles, microbial membranes, and root hairs, water forms thin, ordered layers. In these layers, charge separates. Protons move, electrons flow, and ions don't behave randomly. They follow electrical rules. This electrical organization is what allows minerals to remain mobile without immediately precipitating or interfering with one another. It's what allows ultra-trace elements present at incredibly low concentrations to exert catalytic effects far out of proportion to their abundance. When water maintains electrical coherence, mineral ions can stay dispersed, correctly charged, and coordinated long enough for microbes and enzymes to use them. When that coherence is lost through excess salts, ionic imbalance, or chemical simplification, water loses its organizing capacity. Minerals begin to compete, bind incorrectly, or fall out of solution. Importantly, this doesn't require contamination or toxicity. Water can be chemically clean and still biologically dysfunctional if it can't maintain charge separation and ionic organization. From this perspective, mineral mobility isn't just a chemistry problem or a biology problem. It's an electrical one. And water is the medium where that electrical organization, biologically functional, RO water, softeners, desalination, salt loading. We protect ourselves from toxins, but stripped water of its organizing capacity. Once we understand that water's ability to organize charge matters, the next question becomes, what disrupts that organization in modern systems? In agriculture, water is rarely used in the form it emerged from geology. It's pumped, filtered, softened, disinfected, blended, stored, and redistributed. Each step solves a practical problem. Pathogens, scaling, corrosion, consistency, but each step also alters water's ionic electrical behavior. Excess salts increase ionic competition. Softening replaces calcium and magnesium with sodium. Reverse osmosis strips water of nearly all dissolved minerals. Disinfection alters redox balance. None of these processes are inherently wrong, but together they simplify water chemically and electrically. When water becomes chemically simplified, it loses buffering capacity. Charge separation becomes harder to maintain. Ultra-trace elements struggle to stay mobile. Minerals that once cooperated begin to interfere with one another. The result isn't dramatic failure, it's subtle efficiency. Spray mixes become less compatible. Minerals precipitate more readily. Soil-water films lose their ability to support fine-scale exchange. Microbial processes slow. Even though moisture is present and nutrients appear adequate. This is why two farms using the same fertility program can see very different results. The difference often isn't soil texture, organic matter, or inputs. It's water chemistry upstream of the field. Modern agriculture didn't just change soils. It changed the water moving through them. And that change quietly reshaped how minerals behave long before we notice biological symptoms. Agriculture is a hydrological intervention. How irrigation reshapes mineral behavior. Its salinity, carbonates, calcium lockup, spray incompatibility. Many soil problems begin as water problems. We often describe agriculture as a biological system or a chemical system, but at its core, modern agriculture is also a hydrologic one. We decide where water flows, how fast it moves, how often it's applied, and what chemistry it carries with it. Irrigation doesn't simply moisture, it reshapes mineral behavior. When water enters a field repeatedly with the same ionic profile, the same salts, the same dominant cations, it gradually rewrites the soil electrical and chemical environment. Over time, this affects how minerals interact with soil particles, microbes, and roots. Calcium dominates exchange sites. Sodium disperses aggregates. Potassium competes with magnesium. Ultra-trace elements struggle to stay mobile. None of this requires misuse. It's simply the cumulative effect of water chemistry applied over seasons and years. Fertigation intensifies this process. Nutrients delivered in solution don't just feed plants, they alter the ionic background that all other minerals must navigate. Microbes adapt, roots adapt. Biological weathering slows because the system no longer rewards it. From this perspective, many soil problems begin upstream of the soil profile. They begin in the water entering the system. Regeneration, then, isn't only about rebuilding biology or adding diversity. It's about restoring the hydrological context that allows minerals to remain mobile and microbes to do their work. Until that context is addressed, even the best biological programs can struggle to reach their full potential. Mineral mobility in irrigation water. If minerals can't stay mobile in water, they can't reach roots, they can't feed microbes, and they can't coordinate biology. If agriculture is a hydrological intervention, then irrigation water is the first place mineral mobility is either supported or lost. Long before minerals reach roots or microbes, they have to behave properly in the water moving through the system. Mineral mobility in irrigation water isn't just about what's dissolved. It's about how ions interact. Calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium, bicarbonates, sulfates, and trace elements are all competing for charge, space, and stability. When that balance is off, minerals precipitate, antagonize one another, or bind too tightly to soil particles. From the plant's perspective, immobile minerals might as well not exist. Roots don't access totals. They access what stays mobile in the thin water films surrounding them. Microbes don't liberate minerals efficiently if the surrounding water chemistry collapses those gradients. This helps explain why two fields with similar soil tests can perform very differently. The difference often lies upstream in the water delivering those minerals. When water source supports mobility and exchange, another quietly locks minerals down season after season. Importantly, this isn't about chasing perfect water. It's about understanding whether irrigation water supports cooperation or competition among minerals. When mobility is preserved, biological systems can do what they've evolved to do. When mobility collapses, even well-managed soils begin to simplify. In regenerative systems, mineral diversity matters, but mineral mobility in irrigation water determines whether that diversity actually participates in biology. Spraying water, the overlooked system. Foliar feeding success depends on water chemistry. Hard water ties up. Precipitation, reduced compatibility. Irrigation water problems can hide for years. Spray water problems usually show up immediately. This is where many growers first encounter mineral mobility in very practical ways. Hard or poorly balanced spray water causes familiar issues. Products don't mix well. Precipitates form. Solutions cloud. Residuals build in tanks. And sprays behave inconsistently from field to field. These aren't formulation problems. They're water chemistry problems. Spray solutions are chemically dense environments. Fertilizers, micronutrients, biologicals, and crop protection products all enter the tank together, each carrying their own charges and binding preferences. If the water can't maintain ionic organization, those components begin to interfere with one another before they ever reach the plant. When minerals in spray water lose mobility, they bind prematurely, neutralize active ingredients, or fall out of solution entirely. From the applicator's standpoint, it looks like poor performance. From the system's standpoint, it's a loss of coordination. What's important here is that this failure happens in the water, not on the plant. Long before leaf surfaces, cuticles, or stomata come into play. Spray water chemistry determines whether products arrive in a usable form. Spray systems make mineral mobility visible because they compress time. What happens slowly in soils happens quietly in tanks. And the lesson is the same. When water can't organize minerals, even well-designed products struggle to perform as intended. Conditioning water, not forcing biology. Fix the medium, not the organism. Reduce interference. Improve ion exchange. And restore mobility. Regeneration works best when we remove constraints, not override biology. When biological systems struggle, our instinct is often to intervene directly. Add nutrients, add microbes, add stimulants. Sometimes that works. Often it doesn't, or it works only temporarily. A different approach is to step back and ask whether the medium supporting biology is still functional. In soil systems, that medium is water. If water can't maintain mineral mobility, charge separation, and ionic balance, then biology is forced to operate under constraint, no matter how much we add. Regeneration works best when we remove constraints rather than override systems. Microbes don't need to be forced to work harder. Roots don't need to be pushed. They need an environment where mineral exchange is possible and coordination is rewarded. By restoring mineral mobility in water, reducing interference, improving compatibility, and supporting ionic organization, we allow existing biology to reassert itself. This doesn't guarantee outcomes. It restores the conditions under which outcomes become possible. This principle applies across scales, in soils, in irrigation systems, and in spray tanks. Fixing the medium often resolves issues that appear biological on the surface, if less dramatic than forcing change. But it's more durable. From this perspective, water conditioning isn't an add-on, it's foundational. It sits upstream of fertility, biology, and crop protection, quietly determining whether the system can coordinate the complexity we're asking it to support. Why this matters to regeneration. Regenerative systems depend on microbial coordination, mineral diversity, electrical gradients. Regenerative agriculture is fundamentally about rebuilding relationships between soil and microbes, plants and fungi, carbons and minerals. It assumes that when relationships are restored, biology can regain resilience on its own. But many regenerative systems reach a plateau. Cover crops are diverse, organic matter is rising, biology is present, and yet mineral efficiency, crop quality, and stress tolerance don't always respond as expected. This framework helps explain why. Regeneration builds biological complexity, but if the water moving through the system can't support mineral mobility, that complexity struggles to coordinate. Biology exists, but it operates with reduced coherence. In other words, regeneration can't restore the actors without restoring the stage they perform on. Water chemistry determines whether microbes can exchange minerals, whether roots can access them efficiently, and whether ultra-trace elements remain in circulation long enough to matter. Addressing water doesn't replace soil biology, it unlocks it. It allows fungal highways to function again. It allows microbial redox cycles to operate more efficiently. It allows mineral diversity to actually participate in metabolism rather than remaining trapped in reserve. For regenerative systems aiming to move beyond inputs and towards self-organization, water may be the most upstream lever we can have yet to fully integrate. Not because it's new, but because it's foundational, and because until now, we haven't been looking at it this way. Restoration and order. Water, microbes, plants, animals, and people. Restoration follows collapse in reverse. One of the most useful ways to think about complex systems is to ask not just how they fail, but in what order they fail, and then reverse that sequence. In the case of mineral spectrum collapse, the breakdown doesn't start in plants. It starts upstream. First, water loses its ability to maintain mineral coordination. Then microbial processes weaken. Then plant metabolism simplifies. Only later do animals and people experience the downstream consequences. Restoration follows that same sequence in reverse. You can't sustainably rebuild plant nutrition without restoring microbial function. You can't rebuild microbial function without restoring mineral mobility. And you can't restore mineral mobility without addressing the water carrying those minerals. This doesn't mean ignoring soil biology or plant management. It means recognizing that those efforts depend on an upstream context. Water sets the stage for everything that follows. When water chemistry supports mineral mobility and charge organization, Microbes can resume biological weathering. Ultra-trace elements can re-enter circulation. Plants regain access to broader minerals. Nutrition complexity begins to return. This is not a quick fix model. It's a systems model. It explains why forcing results downstream often produces short-term gains and long-term frustration, and why rebuilding function upstream produces slower but more durable change. If regeneration is about restoring self-organization, then water is where the restoration has to begin. What success looks like without yield claims. Better mineral behavior, improved compatibility, and more resilient systems. When we talk about restoring function upstream, it's natural to ask what success actually looks like. In regenerative systems, success isn't always immediate or dramatic, and it doesn't always show up first as yield. Early signs of restored mineral mobility are often subtle. Irrigation systems behave more predictably. Spray solutions mix more consistently. Fewer compatibility issues appear in tanks. Soil moisture feels different, more responsive, less prone to extremes. Biologically, success shows up as resilience rather than speed. Plants handle stress with less visible collapse. Crops maintain quality deeper into the season. Secondary metabolites, the compounds tied to flavor, defense, and signaling, begin to recover before biomass changes. From a soil perspective, mineral interactions become less antagonistic. Microbial processes require less forcing. Biology begins to coordinate rather than simply persist. Importantly, this kind of success often precedes anything measurable on standard tests. It shows up first in system behavior, how the field responds to rain, heat, pressure, and time. This reframing matters because it shifts expectations away from quick wins and toward durable function. If water quality is being restored as a foundational element, then the system gains the ability to express complexity again. Yield may follow, but resilience comes first. What this is not. This is not a fertilizer, not a biostimulant hype, not yield promises. At this point, it's important to be clear about what this framework is not, because regenerative agriculture has seen plenty of overpromising in recent years. This is not a silver bullet. It's not a shortcut to higher yields. It's not a replacement for good agronomy, good biology, or good management. And it's not a claim that water alone fixes everything. This framework doesn't argue against fertilizers, microbes, or inputs. It explains why those tools sometimes underperform when the system carrying them is constrained. Addressing water quality doesn't override biology. It creates the conditions where biology can work more effectively. It also not about purity or ideology. This isn't a call to abandon filtration, sanitation, or modern infrastructure. Clean water matters. The point is that chemical cleanness and biological functionality are not always the same thing. And finally, this is not about forcing outcomes. There are no guarantees embedded in this approach. Living systems are complex, contextual, and adaptive. What we're talking about is restoring coordination, not dictating results. If regeneration is about rebuilding function rather than chasing metrics, then this framework fits squarely within that tradition. It asks a different upstream question, but it respects the same biological humility that regenerative agriculture is built on. A question for the room. What if regeneration is limited by mobility, not abundance? I want to close by leaving you with a question rather than a prescription. If we accept that mineral diversity matters, and we accept that biology depends on coordination rather than sheer abundance, then we also have to ask whether the systems we're rebuilding are actually capable of moving and organizing that diversity. What if some of the limits we're encountering in regenerative agriculture aren't failures of biology, carbon, or intent, but limits imposed by the water moving through our systems? What if regeneration stalls not because microbes are missing, but because the medium that connects microbes, minerals, and roots can no longer support fine-scale exchange? That possibility doesn't invalidate regenerative practices. It deepens them. It suggests that restoring function may require looking one layer upstream of where we usually intervene. For those of you working in soils, this raises new research questions. For those farming, it raises new observational questions. And for all of us, it invites a broader view of what it means to rebuild living systems. If water truly sits at the center of mineral coordination, linking geology to biology, then understanding and restoring that role may be one of the most consequential frontiers in regeneration. That's not an answer. It's an invitation to look again at a system we thought we already understood. In closing, I would like to discuss reintegrating water into soil biology, how minerals coordinate life, how water coordinates minerals, and how regeneration starts upstream. I want to close by bringing this back to first principles. Regenerative agriculture is ultimately about restoring function, not forcing outcomes, not chasing metrics, but rebuilding systems that can organize themselves again. What we've explored today is the idea that water may be the most upstream part of that system, not as a background input, but as the medium that determines whether minerals stay mobile, whether microbes can exchange nutrients, and whether plants can coordinate metabolism. When water loses that organizing capacity, biology adapts downward. When fragments of that capacity are restored, biology often responds quietly but coherently. This perspective doesn't replace soil biology, carbon management, or good agronomy. It complements them. It suggests that some of the limits we're encountering may not be failures of effort or understanding, but signals pointing us upstream. For farmers, that means observing how water behaves before it ever reaches the root zone. For soil scientists, it means asking new questions about mobility, charge, and coordination that aren't captured by static results.